Alright guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk about how to deck build, a little course in deck building, and today we are going to look at deck building by building a Fire King Snake Eyes deck. You can obviously, just because this is the deck I'm currently playing, this is one of the decks that is currently very strong, but it's not about the deck in particular, it's about deck building rules, deck building ideas, and how you can basically build any deck, how you should build a deck, and a few very important rules that you should follow when building a deck. So the first thing that you need to understand is the difference between, and you might have heard this already in a lot of videos, in my videos or in other content creators videos, the difference between an engine card and a non-engine card. Firstly, to understand what this even means. What is an engine card? What is a non-engine card? In our specific case, we are building a Fire King Snake Eyes deck. So everything that is Fire King or Snake Eyes from a card perspective is an engine card. So the engine card is the archetype that you are playing. If you're playing Labyrinth, then Labyrinth cards are your engine. If you're playing Branded Despia, then Branded Despia cards are your engine. So for example, the Garunix would be our engine card, whereas for example the Maxi that will most likely end up in this deck is a non-engine card, because it's not part of the Fire King engine. It's just a support card. You could think of non-engine being the support cards that you will need to either stop your opponent or help your engine break your opponent's board. There are decks that are built a bit differently, that have different ideas in terms of constructing the deck. They are very heavy on engine. For example, we can take a look at Branded Despia here, for example. Branded Despia is one of the decks together with, this is the where we only had one of each version. It's not this one, it is this one. So Branded Despia as well as Telements is a good example of a deck that is very engine heavy and does not use a lot of non-engine. This is obviously an extreme list, you could say, but you can see there are a lot of Branded Despia cards in here and not a lot of non-engine cards. We have infinite impermanences here. We have Cold Bias and Crossout, which is basically the classic non-engine that you will have in any deck. We have cards like the Harpy's Feather Duster and then obviously Maxis and then Ash Blossom. But other than that, most of the cards that are otherwise in here are engine cards. You can also call Super Polymerization and the Triple Tactics Thrust non-engine cards, as well as the Talents, obviously. But a lot of these cards are engine cards. You will draw a lot of engine if you play Branded Despia. Same as with Telements, you obviously will have hand traps in there, but for those specific decks, the engine part is way bigger, and the idea is that the engine is so strong in decks like Telements or Branded Despia that we don't need a lot of non-engine in order to win against our opponent. But those decks are seldom and rare in between. Normally you will have decks that have a good combination between a non-engine and engine cards. So the first thing that we are going to talk about is the amount of normal summons when it comes to building a deck. So there's a rule that if you go for 40 cards, then you should have around 6 normal summons. So let's take a look at this. Let's type in Fire King here, and we want to get in our normal summons. It makes sense that we give a Ponix here because the Ponix gets us to our island, also to our sanctuary. Ponix is not really a normal summon because in an optimal world, we don't want to normal summon Ponix because the Ponix doesn't get you to where you really want to go. The combo with normal summoning Ponix is very bad. By the way, if you want to learn how to play the Fire King Snake Eye deck, I have a guide in the top right corner. You can go check that out. So it's up to you whether you will count this as a normal summon or not. It obviously is a normal summon, same as with the Avatar, but you can normal summon both of these, but those are not really normal summons in our deck because in an optimal world we don't want to normal summon them. Normal summoning Avatar is definitely nicer than the Ponix because it's just a monster negate, and if you have cards like your Bonfire or your original Symphospoils or Diabellstar, then you can still continue playing without the normal summon. So we want these two cards in here, which are kind of normal summons. This is the part from the Fire King engine that we will put in here as our normal summons, quote unquote. And then we go into the Snake Eyes engine where we will, I should type it otherwise, I guess. Snake Eye. Where we will obviously grab our Snake Eye Ash here, which this is a good definition of a normal summon. We want this card, we want to normal summon this card if we can do it. And then we will put in cards like the Oak, which once again is a normal summon, but isn't really in the deck to be normal summon. There's a big difference of card being able to be normal summoned and being a dedicated normal summon. There are some instances in which we want to normal summon the Oak. Obviously, if we have all other Snake Eye stuff already in the graveyard that we can revive, then having the Oak can be really nice. But in a normal game state, we don't want to do this. We want a Flame Birch Dragon. Obviously, this is not a normal summon, so we can still put it in here. And then we have our Poplar. In this case, we will go, okay, let's put it out for here now because otherwise it's a bit confusing. We put our Poplar in here. This is definitely a normal summon. This is a normal summon that can get you into a very nice line. that can end up on a good board by itself. So this constitutes a good normal summon. A good normal summon constitutes a monster that can work as a one-card combo or can get you into your combo. And in this case, we have our Snake Eye Ash, our Poplar, and our other Poplar. So a lot of people were, for example, putting in a third Poplar to replace the missing Snake Eye Ash. What I am going to do here, and this is where we go back into the Fire King engine, I like the new Fire King card, Consort Ulcanix, which I will put in 2 in here in our deck. In one version I had 3 of them in here, but then I cut 1. You can also go ahead and put 3 in here, because if we now put 3 cards in here, you can count our normal summons. We have 1 normal summon, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is the optimal amount of normal summons. If we want to go for a 40 card deck, this basically guarantees you that you almost always will open one of these normal summons, but you will not open multiple of them, because obviously that's bad. If I open my Fire King Cotier Ulcanix together with my Snake Eye Ash, I always want to go Snake Eye Ash, which yeah, that doesn't really work. The Poplar is a bit of a specific card, because you can also add him with the Bonfire, and then he's a special summon. So pushing the Poplar up by 1 more, you can definitely argue. And then you could also say in the current version, for example, I'm playing with 2 Ulcanix, but you can obviously go ahead play with 3, because this would fulfill our 6 normal summon rule here, as we are not counting our Avatar or Ponix or our Oak as a normal summon, because those are cards we don't want to normal summon. We want to always normal summon the Poplar, the Ulcanix, or the Snake Eye Ash over these other cards. And as you can see, these are all engine cards right now. So you have our 6 normal summons. Let's assume we are building a 40 card deck. I will say something to when you want to go over 40 cards. I will talk about this afterwards. And now there is another important rule that you should be aware of. In terms of how many non-engine versus engine cards you want in your deck, I already said there are exceptions like Telements or Brand Despia. Puck suggested an interesting rule where you would want to have around 70% engine and 30% non-engine cards. This guarantees that you draw 1 or maybe 2 non-engine cards in your starting hand. So for example, a Snake Eye Ash or an Ash Blossom or Maxi that you can stop your opponent with, but also gives you or guarantees you basically that you will also open engine cards to play your strategy. Because if you only draw hand traps, for example, a Nibiru, a Maxi, an Ash Blossom, and 2 infinite impermanences, that's nice, so you can probably stop your opponent, but how are you going to play the game then? So we want a balance of cards that can stop our opponent or break the board. You can obviously also go with the idea of not playing hand traps but playing board breakers. Then the same idea applies. You would put in, I don't know, 3 Dark Rulers, 3 Forbidden Droplets, then I guess infinite impermanence still counts somehow. You can put in evenly matched and other stuff, obviously. Cards like Change of Heart, for example. Yeah, so we have our normal summon engine in here, and we want to go for a 40 card deck. So in terms of satisfying our close to 70-30 rule, we would want to have about 9 non-engine cards in our deck, because then we would have somewhat of a 33 to 33 we would basically want a bit more than 9 non-engine cards. Let's say 12. 12 is a good point. So let's start with our non-engine cards before we fill up the engine here. So for our non-engine cards, you will basically always want to go with the classic non-engine package that's basically in every deck. The Maxi, because it's the strongest card in the game, giving you the ability to skip entire opponent's turn, but also giving you the ability to build a board and then drop a Maxi and just win the game from there. Then you want your Ash Blossom, because you can use the Ash Blossom to negate the Maxi. This is why we have it in every deck. But this is also a good hand trip against a lot of decks. You can Ash Blossom a lot of important targets in basically any deck, but the main idea is to Ash Blossom the Maxi so we can play the game. And then what you're normally also going for is Called by the Grave to counter either an Ash Blossom or a Maxi. And then also, this is a bit more optional, but a lot of people putting in Crossout Designator. The next non-engine I personally like, which I think should be in every deck, but this also depends on the meta that we are currently in. There might be metas in which different hand traps are better. So for example, a lot of combo decks are in the game. Then you might go for a Nibiru, put in 3 Nibirus instead of, I don't know, infinite impermanence. There might also be decks that search a lot, add a lot of cards to the hand. Then you would put in Droll and Lockbirds over, I don't know, infinite impermanences. The idea being that a Droll and Lockbird locking your opponent out from adding more cards to the hand, or a Nibiru clearing an entire board being more effective than just an infinite impermanence stopping one of your opponent's monsters effect. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So at this point we have 12 non-engine in our deck. So if we would fill up the rest of our deck with engine now, then we would basically have fulfilled the 70-30 rule, at least close. So let's try to do this here. And sometimes you will see that you run into some issues because sometimes you don't have enough useful engine cards that you can actually put in the deck in order to basically adhere to this rule, right? And this is where you, in the current meta, you see a lot of people playing close to 15 non-engine cards. And we will talk over this in a moment here. Let's firstly fill up our engine cards that we want to put in here. We want 2 Kirin. You can also go ahead and put in 3. We want to go Runics when it comes to the Fire King cards. You also need 1 island at least. We don't need to use a Skyburn, but we put in a Skyburn here to have an additional search target for our Ponyx here. And then we also put in a Fire King Sanctuary. Another important card that we want in this deck is the Bonfire here. The Bonfire is basically another normal summon. What's so nice about the Bonfire here is that it can search as a normal summon if we are missing a normal summon, but it can also search the Poplar if we have already used our normal summon and then go for another special summon. This is why Poplar is a normal and a special summon together with the Bonfire, which is quite nice. And then we want our wanted Diabellstar engine here, the wanted, and then the Diabellstar. And obviously the non-engine cards you could also differentiate in cards that help you with your game plan. So for consistency, for example, the Diabellstar together with the wanted or the Bonfire, these are cards that basically bring you into your engine. These are cards that get you to your important normal summons that start your combos. And then you also have other cards, like for example the Skyburn, which is a bit of an engine card because it's a Fire King card, but then again it's also a non-engine card because it can help you break the board like a hand trap or a board breaker would, right? So there are different cards when it comes to engine cards, support engine cards you could say, and then core engine cards that basically enable you to play the game. Then you go ahead and put in 1 original Symphospoils in here, and we quickly have to go over to the Snake Eyes stuff here because we are missing a Flamberge Dragon. And then what else are we missing here in terms of engine? We do not miss anything more, at least as I am aware of. We basically have all the engine stuff in here. You can now go ahead and put in more engine, for example, the Subversion here to have an additional search target for your Poplar. You can also go ahead and play a Temple if you want. Then you could also go ahead and play an additional Fire King Avatar Kirin if you wanted to. And let's say we wanted to fill up these 40 cards here. You could go put in another Poplar to have 7 normal summons if you wanted to. We could also, what else could make sense here if we want to go for another engine card, just to have 12 non-engine in our deck. So maybe we also, by this one we definitely need, it's a must-have engine card. So this would be a deck where we would have a 12 non-engine and then we would have the rest, so 28 cards engine, which would be close to our 70-30 rule. We have 6 normal summons in our deck, so this would be close to an ideal deck building idea, right? But what you could also do, and I'm doing at the current moment, this also depends on how the meta looks like. I like to run a bit more non-engine cards. The advantage is that you obviously have more options to stop your opponent, because in the current meta we have the problem that this Snake Eye deck that is around everywhere, it's hard to stop it with 1 hand trap, and you just have a better opportunity to stop your opponent if you draw 2 hand traps, and obviously having more hand traps in here gives you more opportunity to draw them and stop your opponent. So for example, we could go ahead and put in 2 Effect Veilers, and I don't know, let's say we also put in a Ghost Mourner. I guess you would just put in 3 Effect Veilers. I just only have 2. So in this case, we would have basically tributed some of our engine to put in even more non-engine. We have 15 now, 15, 25, which means we will more often have 2 hand traps, but there will also be more times in which we don't draw anything of our engine, therefore we have a bigger chance of bricking with our deck. This is like on a spectrum. You have to think about, do I want more ability to stop my opponent, or do I want more consistency in my deck, right? This is something you have to test out for yourself, but this we could also do in terms of our 70-30 rule, obviously then leaning a bit more to a 40-60 spread here. And then let's talk about when and why you would want to go over 40 cards. What's the idea? So you could basically argue you will never go over 40 cards because this makes it more unlikely to draw your starters, right? So if I put more cards in here than 40, the ability or the chance of me just drawing a Snake Eye Ash or any of our other normal summon starters is less. And that's true. But what the going over 40 card does for you is it also makes it less likely to draw the one-off bricks that you do not want to draw, that you do not want to have in your starting hand. So let's, for example, say we would go over 40 and put in, I don't know, 3 triple tactics talents, right? This is obviously a bit dangerous because now we have 18 non-engines, so this makes our chance of drawing our starters even less, basically. But what does this also accomplish? This also accomplishes that cards that we do not want to see in our starting hand, for example, the Fire King High Avatar Garunix or the other Garunix that we normally want to search, or for example, Kirin we definitely would want to see in our starting hand. Cards like the Original Sinful Spoils, if we already have a Diabellstar or Poplar, this would be a bit sad. Or cards like the Oak, which we can't really use to normal summon. We don't want to use them as a normal summon. The Flambird String is something you definitely do not want to have in your starting hand. And then maybe the Fire King Ponix, because you don't want to normal summon him, you will want to basically summon him via your Original Sinful Spoils. And if we have already this guy in our hand, this means if we activate this, then we need to summon him from the hand. Thereby, we basically have lost one entire hand card. This could have also been an infinite permanence to help us stop our opponent. So going over 40 has the advantage of seeing your bricks, your one-offs that you do not want to see, that you basically want to grab from your deck via one mean or the other. You will see them less often in your hand, and this is an upside, but keep in mind you will also see less often your starters. This obviously is not true if you just go ahead and not put in triple tactic talents in here, but put in more starters. We could also go ahead and put in another Poplar to go over 40, and then, I don't know, we could also put in something like Where Art Thou, which says if we control a level 1 monster, we can add another level 1 monster from our deck to our hand. So if, for example, you have a legendary Fire King Ponix normal summon, which is not ideal, you can go ahead, activate this, and add a Poplar, which then gives you access to all of your other plays. So you could also go ahead and do this, thereby not really reducing your ability to play the game by being less consistent, because we have put in more engine in here. But this again means obviously that we will see our, in this case, we are at 15, right? Our 15 non-engine less often because we have put in more engine. So in this specific case, we would have come closer to our 70-30 rule. But this is something you definitely have to try out for yourself. I just wanted to basically inform you on these basic deck building rules, the 70-30 rule for once, and then the fact that you want around about 6 normal summons in a 40 card list. Obviously, if you go over 40, then you want to add more. So let's say we go up to 60 cards, then it's basically like we have put in another half deck. If we calculated from 40, so you have 40, half of this is 20, so you put in another half deck on top of your 40, and then you can definitely argue for putting another 3 more normal summons. So then we would not have 6 normal summons, but in a 60 card deck you can also go ahead and have 9 normal summons, giving you basically the same chance of drawing these normal summons as you would have in a 40 card deck with 6 normal summons, right? But this is all that I wanted to share with you today. As I already said, there are also other decks, like we have just taken a look at the branded Despia deck here. This is a specific 60 card version. There are also 40 card versions, but you can go ahead and take a look at 40 card version branded Despia decks and see that there is not a lot of non-engine in there. There's a lot of engine in there, and obviously we are going over 60 just to not see some one-offs that we really don't want to see in our hand, like the fusion cards or this card here that we want to dump to our graveyard, cards that we want to search, or cards that we want to dump with other cards like the Foolish Burial into our Tragedy and stuff like this. So this is why we're running 60 here, just to reduce the odds of us drawing the useless one-offs in our deck. Cards like the Fawn of Albers that we want to use with our branded fusion and not have in the hand because we have other normal summons that we want to use this for. But yeah, Branded Despia, same as with the Elements, is an example for a deck that is heavy on engine and low on non-engine. But this is everything that I wanted to tell you today, just as some basic deck building rules so that you understand the difference firstly between non-engine and engine, then the 70-30 rule and our normal summon rule. Obviously there are other things that you need to concern when it comes to building a deck, which is the extra deck. But when it comes to the extra deck, there are not that many rules that you need to follow. It's more like your toolkit that you can use to support your engine's main game plan, you could say. And then also cards that help you remove opponents' threats, like for example an Underworld Goddess or something. But that's all for now. Let me know in the comments what you think of this video. Are there any more tips that you have for the community? Just go ahead and post them in the video video. If you like my content, please consider subscribing, hitting the thumbs up and the notification bell, and we will see each other in the next one.